So when I'm normally sharing this, it's normally with a group of people who are already in some way opening up to a greater part of themselves. Maybe you would call it on a spiritual path. I suspect we've got quite a wide audience here tonight, so I'll start at the beginning, so to speak. Self-realization. Is everybody familiar with the term? Yeah. And what it's pointing to? Yeah. What I'm speaking about, I asked this partly for the reasons I've just said, but also yesterday I was in Liverpool, a much smaller group, and somebody asked me, oh, do you mean personal or do you mean the universal self? And I mean the universal self. The big self, the true self, self-realization, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, it's that I'm talking about. That's my whole focus. That's the whole focus of my sharing tonight, and indeed in all of my life, really. It might be worth just saying, I don't normally do this, but perhaps just to give you all a bit of context about this, and I think it's useful to understand this. This that I speak of, self-realization, is available and open to all, and I don't call it life's greatest gift and life's simplest gift for no reason. It is really available to all of us, not just the special few. This is one of the myths of the whole thing to do with self-realization. My background may be surprising, it may not. You know, born in Lancashire, as I said, in Manchester more accurately, brought up with a church background, had all that indoctrination that comes with that. And took a fairly standard path, went to university, did a degree in civil engineering, had a very successful career in civil engineering. Wasn't something that I would have expected from my background, which was pretty much working class. But it was that way. And probably around 2000 things started to change. I realized that actually, you know what, although I was on the outside looked to be a fairly calm individual, I remember being on a skiing holiday in Whistler, it was, in Canada around 2000, and was dreaming about work, and I thought, this has got to stop. This has got to stop. And it was at that point I took up meditation. And if I was to sort of offer you a trigger point as to where this all came from, that would probably be the most recent and key one. And I took it very, very seriously, and I meditated pretty much every day since, for at least half an hour a day. And a few years into that process, I really felt a strong calling to leave what was by then a pretty successful career in civil engineering behind to follow the spiritual calling. I didn't really know what it was. I wasn't really aware so much of self-realization then. I'd heard of the Buddha and things like that, but you know, it wasn't on my radar, so to speak, and yet there was something calling me. 5 years later, I walked out of a very successful job, having just turned a massive business around for the company I work for. The client was happy, the staff were happy, and just left it all behind to pursue whatever this was that was calling me. And things really started to accelerate then. I'd already been pursuing by this time in parallel with a very grounded career in civil engineering. A very grounded career in civil engineering. I'd started to pursue alternative healing and found out wondrous things that I didn't know that could happen. You may have heard of some of these things like Reiki, emotional freedom techniques, quantum touch. I studied and learned about all these things and actually practiced them as a sideline to my work, and with some amazing results both for me and for people I was sharing it with. But I'd realized as all this was going on, there was something, a golden thread, if you like, that was connecting all this, and I didn't quite know what it was. The meditation, as I say, was continuing. And around 2011, I had the first of what became a series of very profound spiritual experiences. And I'll say a little bit about that. I don't normally do that these days, but I think it's helpful for you perhaps if I do. So firstly, this one came to me in a dream. And I was given some information. I won't go into the details, but let's just say in this dream I was made aware of something that if I just used my intention to connect with what this higher presence that was sat here called spheres, turned out to be spheres of light. That was all I needed to do. And I was an energy worker by this time. I'd given up work, woke up the next morning, remembered the dream, and just lay there in bed and said, okay, I remember that dream, I'll just do this. I'll just use my intention to connect with spheres of light. And the instant I did this, there was a huge rush of what I can only describe to you as energy. Heat, tingling, everything, the works. This may be news to some of you, it may be commonplace for some of you, I don't know. But this must have lasted maybe 15, 20 minutes. And I felt transformed in the process. I knew something had happened, and it turned out to be a shift in consciousness. The process continued, and 2 and a bit years on, after having explored this and shared this widely with people, because there's a very strong calling for me to do that, the most profound, and there have been a series of other experiences in between which I won't go into tonight, the most profound experience unfolded. This may or may not mean much to you, but I'll share it. So let's say it was in a meditative experience, a meditation, and suddenly there was no awareness of this body that you see before you. There wasn't even any awareness of the individual that you would know as Philip. An absolute stillness. A sense of eternity or the infinite. All of this being completely non-personal. No form, just pure awareness. An awareness that recognized, if these words mean anything to you, itself as itself. A remembrance of this. A sort of, aha, this is it. This is who I am, but not in a personal sense. Maybe you could use the word oblivion or bliss. Completely unequivocal in its awareness, in the knowing of what this was. I have no idea if you were to put a measure of linear time, how long this took place for, you could say eternity, and it would be right. But in physical linear time that we're so used to, it might be 15, 20 minutes, it may be half an hour, it may be an hour, I don't know. I have no measure. And at some point in that process, remember, there was no form, there was no awareness of the form. There was the vaguest of recognition that, let's say, wasn't there a body here? And somewhere out of this eternity, this void, this eternal essence, two words emerged. And those two words were infinite, silence, and with it a recognition that whatever this was, this knowingness, this awareness, had chosen not only these two words. There was a sense of, these two words you must use to share this. And as the words were, let's say, a vibration, sounds of vibration, the vibration of those words, they were also heard. And at that point, this form, this body, or the awareness of it, perhaps more accurate might be, reappeared. And you might say everything had changed. You might also say, equally accurately, nothing had changed. Everything had changed in that now there was beyond doubt the realization that this in fact was the self-realization that I'm talking about, and that is the subject of our shared gathering tonight. Beyond doubt. And nothing had changed in the realization that actually I, and this is a non-personal I, had always been that. And so, my friends, are you. This may be news to you. It may not. It matters not whether it means anything to you at this level. The one that's really hearing this or already knows this is this one here in your heart. This knowing is already there. And this life in this body that you have is an invitation to the experiential realization of that. That's all. And that is a beautiful invitation. By the way, I'm going to stress this point. Don't believe a word I say. Because truth is an experience, not a belief. You will find, if you look at sages, realized beings over the millennia, they have all said this in one way or another. It's not about belief. It's about experience. And so hence we get to why it is life's simplest gift unto itself, because you are already it. And you cannot not be it. You can, however, create the experience of not being that by believing in something, indeed anything, less than the absolute truth of who you really are. This belief in I am this body, I am the story of this body, the experiences of this body, the conditioning of this body, these all together collectively create a block to the realization of the self. But if you were to drop the belief and unequivocally open to the possibility of this universal or infinite and non-personal self, the realization would be yours, but it would be non-personal. And what I mean by that is not, oh, Jane has this. Actually, everybody has this. And we are all that. And yet the form of Jane or Rob or Philip is still here in its unique expression of that. So simple in that you are already it, and cannot, in fact, not be it, but you can certainly create the experience of it not being that and suffer. You've all heard of the Buddha, I am sure. The Buddha said, life is suffering. And what he meant by that was that the identified life, the identification with the form and the story of the form, is what creates the suffering. When that drops, the form is still here, but the suffering is gone. So life's invitation to itself for you are life is to realize who you really are. And if this feels like it's mind-blowing, then that's deliberate. If it doesn't make any sense, don't worry. Your heart already knows. And you don't have to believe me. For when this realization unfolds, whether it's in this form that you have now or another form, you will know. You will know. And so the second part, life's greatest gift, is the realization of itself as life. And hence life's simplest and greatest gift. All makes sense so far. At some level, perhaps not, don't worry. Okay, so it's that we're talking about. So perhaps then the question comes, well, if it's so simple, why don't more of us realize this? And it comes down to the belief thing that I mentioned earlier. We believe in things that we are not. And that one factor, the belief, the attachment to that belief, the identification with that belief, is enough to create the illusion that you're not this universal self. So again, you will hear many people over history talking about belief being a block to the realization. So if this challenges your beliefs, then this is a good thing. This is a good thing. Mind at the moment might be going, but. Let it do that. Because there's something higher and a higher awareness that's watching, witnessing this. If you look deeply enough, there's something inside. Yes. To this. Not because this apparent body, this apparent form called Philip happens to be saying it, but because you are already it and you know this already at some level, whether you are consciously aware of it or not. So profound, so beautiful indescribable beyond words, and any words I use are poor substitutes for the realization. And yet we are in these bodies, we are in these forms, and so we use words to try to point at it or signpost it or indicate it's this way, if that makes any sense to you at all. So, yeah, that is the essence that I'm talking about. That's, if you wanted to know why you're here, it's up to you, but you can decide. Maybe that's a good reason to be in this form. Maybe that's a great opportunity, maybe that's a great invitation. I can recommend it, but in a very non-personal way, of course. Okay, enough, I think, in terms of introduction. How are we doing on time? Because I know you've got a break at 9. Good, we're doing good. Having set that scene, and I sense a stillness now, I feel it would be good to introduce you to a meditation. We'll do this for maybe 20 minutes, maybe a bit longer. I don't know, is everybody here familiar with meditation? Anybody not meditated? One or two. Do not worry if you've never attempted meditation before. It is very simple and I will guide you. Some people have said to me, I can't meditate, and this is not true. This is just a belief. Everybody can meditate. In fact, as the realization unfolds, you find that life is a living meditation. And meditation isn't also, for those who haven't meditated before, what some people may perceive it to be. Sitting in a cave in the Himalayas or whatever, or sitting cross-legged in the lotus position. No. These are all maybe good things, but they're not necessary for meditation. Meditation is simply about bringing your awareness back to this self. It's a matter of where your attention is placed, and for most of us, most of the time, it's up here, listening to the noise going on in our heads. But that's not who you are. So the simple meditation I will use will be about shifting your attention back into the heart space, into the silence. And I bring this fibre optic lamp along as a metaphor, a symbol of the meditation, a symbol of the realization as well. And I'll just say a bit about that because there's a few people here who haven't meditated before, so it might just be helpful. So if you were to consider you, as you currently perceive yourself to be, as one of these blue points of light at the end of the fibre optic, that's you. And on the planet at the moment, is it 7.4 billion or something like that, people? And that's just the people. And it looks for all the world like all the other points of light, all the other beings are separate from all the others. And that's how we're perceiving the world. We're looking out into the world. There's another body here and there's another body there and so on, and it's separate from me. And when you look at life in this way with the identification, the belief in that's how things are, then this leads to the suffering the Buddha spoke of. However, in the meditation, I'll be asking you to open to the awareness of what I will refer to both as spheres of light, that first experience I related to, which I later realized is the same as what I will speak of as the universal I am presence. I am being being. The words I am means being. Now this I am I'm speaking of is not personal. It's not that I am Philip, I am a man, I am a woman. No. Nothing after the I am. Just I am. Just being. I am is being. But in a universal sense. And we can all sense this. It's aliveness. It's just the sense of this aliveness. So I'll be using that in the meditation. And that's the first part of the meditation. It will be bringing our awareness, starting to look down the fibre optic. Starting to focus on the beingness. And that's represented in this metaphor here by this blue light you can see at the bottom. The ultimate sphere of light, if you like, of universal scale. Represented as beingness. Consciousness. Energy aware of itself is a simple way to look at consciousness. And you are a self-aware being. So you're a conscious being. So I'll be saying to focus on this I am presence, spheres of light, same thing. I'll be guiding you on that. And then as your attention rests upon this and you open from your heart to that, I'll be pointing out that the mere fact that you can do this, notice this aliveness, then there must be something higher, a higher awareness, a higher presence that can perceive this presence, this beingness, can watch it. So that can't be who you are, the beingness. There must be something higher. And that higher presence is the infinite silence I spoke of. And it's in us all, and it is us all. So I'll be using that as the next step in the meditation. It is a very simple meditation. Doesn't make any sense to you right now, do not worry. Just simply be open to the experience. It can be very powerful for some, but don't worry whether it's just awareness or whether, oops, sorry, you've got bells and whistles going. Do not matter, it's just your experience. Just watch, just allow, just watch and witness and see what emerges. If anything does emerge for you, just simply allow it to be there. Whether it's an insight, whether it's some feelings coming up, some emotions, some energy flowing, feeling hot, feeling cold, just simply watch without any judgment. Just watch. And just allow that to happen. If that makes sense to you, okay? Everybody happy with that as a sort of kind of basic introduction to the meditation? So I think that was about 20-25 minutes, something like that. May surprise you. I didn't time it exactly. And we're now just about coming up to 9, and I understand it's standard practice to have a break here for about 15 minutes, yeah? At that point. So what I'm going to do, rather than inviting anybody to share just now, is simply break at this point. But if there is an experience that you want to share, we can do that after the break. And also after the break, what will be really helpful is if you've got any burning questions for you, either about that experience, about anything I've shared thus far, or perhaps more importantly, things that are unfolding for you in your life right now that appear to be blocking, let's say, your path about, the spiritual realization, then please ask those, because I find that in the inquiry, spiritual inquiry, it's where we all gain benefit from other people's experiences, and I'll be able to offer you some pointings as to what emerges literally in the moment about that question. Okay, so time for a break. Thank you very much, and if we can gather and be sat down by 9:15, yeah? Thank you very much. Okay, thanks, Rob. Everybody hear me okay? Is that mic on? Okay. Welcome back. Welcome back. So I said just before the break, if there was anything that anybody was burning to share or ask, perhaps. Let's start with the meditation first. From that, let's have a look at that then.
I'll share something.
Go on, please do.
I used to do it quite a lot when I was on my own,
Yeah.
a few years back. I haven't done for quite a while. It's kind of nice to get back into it. So I might start doing it again.
Good. Good.
Feels like my life's been a bit chaotic in the past few years, so it might benefit me a hell of a lot.
I can guarantee if you commit to it, it will definitely benefit you. Not because I say so, but because it will help you connect with you. And just whilst I'm on that then, it's an opportune moment. The cards that were on your seats, on the back of them, the white face, there's one of those little code things you see, a barcode. QR code is what it's called. For those of you who have smartphones, and most people seem to have a smartphone these days, you can get a free app called a QR code scanner you can download. And with that app open, it'll scan this QR code, and it will take you to a page on my website which is called Infinite Silence, funnily enough. And on that is a 30-minute guided infinite silence experience meditation. It's the same meditation is actually plastered all over the site, but this one will take you to that page where it's specifically referred to, and it's a YouTube video. So like that old martini advert, anytime, any place, anywhere, you can flash your smartphone at this and use that meditation. I would recommend to anybody who's struggling with anything in life, meditation as a tool that commit to as something for yourself. It will benefit you. It will calm you down. If you can do this for, maybe start, if you've not been meditating, start simple and short, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, then 15, then 20, then half an hour. If you do this regularly, it will make a massive difference. Just by simply allowing yourself that space and that time. And that meditation there, it's free. You can, I think some people have even downloaded it onto their phone. So feel free to use that. So thanks for sharing that, and thanks for asking that question. Anybody else want to ask anything about the meditation or share anything? Yeah.
I have a stretch and core class at the YMCA once a week, which we finish off with 15 minutes relaxation, and this meditation you did didn't seem any different to that.
Right.
So I didn't see any spheres of light or anything. I didn't experience anything like that at all. It just,
Yeah, that's fine.
there was a lot of noise going in the background there as well, which distracted me. So.
It doesn't really matter whether you experienced it any differently or not. Your experience is your experience. If you feel called from the heart, you can use this. If not, just carry on with what works for you. I'm not saying this is better or anything different. I'm just saying this process that I'm using is helping you to shift your awareness back to the core of your being. It's very simple, very effective, and if it works for you, use it. But if not, then that's fine. It doesn't really matter.
The other thing I was thinking of, when you said to say I am, is that where the came from? Possibly.
You know, I wouldn't know the answer to that, but the reason I was focusing on the I am, just to take that a little bit further, is I am, as I said earlier, is being. Now, most of us, without really thinking about what we're doing in everyday language, add things after the I am. So, I am a man, or I am a woman, or I am this, that, and the other.
Or I am doing something.
Yeah. And this isn't actually ultimately true about who you are. The I we most often use is an individual I. And when you put the weight of belief behind, you know, I am a person with this, that, and the other, I am a woman with this story, or I am a man with this story, and my experiences, then what you will do is simply create more and more suffering. It may vary from mild to extreme, depending on what's going on in your life. So what I was inviting you to do with that I am was take away all the stuff after the I am and just allow being to be present. Now, this beingness that I was speaking about is non-personal, it's actually universal. When it's just the pure, what's referred to often in spiritual circles as the I am presence. Most people can get this confused as a personal I am presence. I'm not talking about that. I am talking about a universal beingness that is within us and indeed is us, part of us all. So that's why I use that vehicle. And then I was asking you to be aware or notice the mere fact that one can observe or see or sense this beingness, then it must be being seen, sensed, or witnessed from somewhere. And that somewhere is the infinite silence. And it's not a place, it's infinite, it is everywhere, and it is us all. And that's where the power in that meditation is. For some people, it's a very instantaneous effect. For some people, it takes longer. It doesn't really matter. But that's why I use what appears to be a process, although actually it isn't. What it's actually about doing is shifting your attention from here, which is where most of us have our attention, in the head space, back into the silent space within the heart. And that's why I do it that way. It wasn't something that Philip Wade invented. It was more a case of this was the awareness that emerged, would be a better and more accurate way to describe it. So that's why I do it that way, and that's why I use those particular words that I do to help shift that awareness. Because it is, when one's awareness is, let's say, anchored in and as this silence, this infinite silence, then yes, the beingness will be seen, the body will be seen, all the things that go on in the body will still be witnessed and noticed, but there'll be a knowingness, an awareness that's watching all of that, and with that the realization that actually you are this silence. And again, I stress, it's not about taking my word for it or believing anything I happen to say about it. When it becomes experiential for you, you will know. You will know. So that's why I do it that way. Does that help answer the question? Yeah, okay.
How often do you meditate? Okay.
So these days, in terms of formal
Like today.
meditation, the formal sit down was with you today. But what I would also say, just by way of clarification, is meditation just sitting down in a chair or lying down and meditating? Or is it actually having your attention rested in and as this silence always? And I would offer you that it is the latter. And so life then becomes a living meditation as the self is anchored. That said, the call often will emerge on a daily basis just to sit down in a chair and be quiet, be still, and just do nothing. And I'll just be there, and like an hour's gone by, the awareness of the body's gone, and then I'm back, so to speak. So the regular practice I spoke of earlier was probably from around 2000 that started through to 2012, something like that, 2013. But the impact of that was so massive that on the awareness of around in 2011 of the first part, the universal consciousness, the I am, that stayed with me ever since that day. Not a few moments have gone by where that awareness has not been. And then in 2014, when the silence, let's say, revealed itself, realized itself, then that has been in the constant awareness. And that then becomes the living meditation. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah. So after the end of the world of 2012, you were focusing in the moment, and your awareness is in the moment all the time.
Yeah, obviously thoughts still come. You still have a body. You still have to deal with a body. And yeah, you can get distracted just like anybody else. Nobody's claiming perfection, shall we say. It's not quite like that. But what I would say I found, or have found, is that, let's say a thought comes and you start following that, the silence pulls me back very quickly. And the awareness of the silence is there again. So more like that. You're still going to have thoughts, you're still going to have bodily functions. You're going to feed this body, you're going to eat, you're going to live normally. You'll still make the odd mistake, you'll still do things like, but the awareness of the silence and the stillness within is ever present. Does that help?
Yeah, that's fine,
Yeah. Anybody else want to ask anything about?
I don't meditate very frequently. I'll admit to that in front of everybody. But is meditation something that you can sort of just like hop in and out of, or do you need to sort of like practice it and, like you were saying, start off with 5 or 10 minutes a day and build it up slowly to like half an hour a day or something? Do you need to do it daily?
I would say you would get more benefit from it by making a commitment to it and making it a daily practice. It becomes a cumulative thing. And what I feel you'll find is that, certainly found this, that it may seem like making an effort to sit down and meditate at first, because we live such busy lives. But by making this commitment and doing this consistently, after a period of time, by committing to it and you're building up the meditation, you'll find that you won't want to have a day where you haven't found a space for meditation. In my own experience, for 9 of those 10 years when I started in 2000, I was still working 60, 70 hours a week and still meditating. So if people say I haven't got time for meditation, I would question that. You can find time. Even if it was on the train to a business meeting, I would sit there, I would put 5-10 minutes aside and meditate, and then maybe do the rest at night when I'd finished for the day. Or maybe I'd start extra early. Most of the times it was get up half an hour earlier and meditate. So by making the commitment to it, you will find a benefit. It may be subtle at first, but certainly I noticed things started to settle down inside, and it was so effective, it just became not addictive in the sense of an addiction, but you just didn't want to not have a day where you didn't meditate. So it's about an inner commitment, and if you can make that and commit to that, you will find benefit. Does that help you? Yeah. Yeah.
Any idea what it means if you're seeing really vivid colours when you're really into it?
So this is quite a common experience.
Almost like a kaleidoscope.
Yeah, kaleidoscopic type colours. So, when you close your eyes, this is quite a common experience with the meditation that many people will get. Not, I wouldn't say everybody, but many people will get you closing with all these colours, reds, blues, golds, greens, whatever appearing there. And, we're conscious beings, and I said earlier that consciousness, in simple terms, is energy aware of itself. So when you're closing your eyes and you're connecting with the inner world, one of the things you're starting to see there is that flow of energy represented in colour, and colour is just different vibrations of light. And you're starting to connect with that. And sometimes those can become quite intense and quite bright, and often the colours you'll see in that way may appear to you to be more beautiful than you could perhaps represent in the physical domain. There's a purity about them. So what you're seeing there is a flow of energy that's coming from within you, in simple terms. Yeah. It's not necessary to see those, by the way. Many people sort of say, oh, nothing happened for me there, I didn't see anything, I didn't get any bells and whistles. For me, as I close my eyes and meditate, it's just silence. It's completely black. Yeah, sometimes the colour's there, but for now, if it's just completely still and completely silent, the attention's rested in and out of the stillness, that is enough. That is enough. Does that help answer your question? Yeah. You'll see many meditations out there, perhaps just add a little bit more guided meditations where, asking you to focus on this, that and the other. Perhaps also builds a little bit on the other question here earlier. These are okay, but they can get a bit mental in terms of engaging the thinking mind, shall we say. One of the reasons the silence, let's say, expressed it the way I did by simply first bringing the attention to the body, then the I am, and then noticing that the I am is witnessed from the silence. Those simple steps take out the thinking process. Now, I said a few more words than I would normally do to perhaps a group of people who would be, let's say, on the path. Sometimes I just say, become aware of the infinite silence, and that's it. No mental process is engaged there, and that's very deliberate. But for a group that's perhaps mixed, some not been experienced in meditation before, I'll use a few more words to try to help them, let's say, see their way through the process. It appears like a process to the mind, but actually all that's happening is the attention is just shifting. And the whole, let's say, point of it is to bring the attention back into its home and in its center. And this space, this silent space, is beyond mind. And it is in that beyond the mind space where the realization will emerge. One doesn't think one's way to the realization, one is the realization, if that makes any sense to you. And so this little step and this little metaphor are to show you in a fairly simple way that actually this awareness at the base here, the infinite silence, is like the battery, the power behind the lamp, except this is a universal sized one and it's infinite. So bringing those two questions together, that's why, one of the reasons again why it is done the way it is. And why often I will use very few words. Any more for any more?
On the subject of picturing, sometimes on the relaxation part of this spiritual class,
Yeah.
she asks us to, picture a lake or picture a mountain. Look, I can never do that. I can never get that picture into my mind.
Sure.
So,
And I would go as far to say, it's not really necessary. These devices are sometimes used in guided meditations. What they're seeking to do is move your focus away from the mental chatter into a deeper space. They're devices. Somebody once asked me, and again this relates to, how often should I meditate? The question that was phrased once was, how often should I do this? How often should I practice this? And the simple answer is until you don't have to. So it also picks up on this gentleman's question here as well, until you don't have to. What I mean by that is it comes down to this, interestingly. The purpose of all spiritual practice is so you don't have to. The purpose of all spiritual practice is so you don't have to. What does that mean? It means practice out being who you really are. The practice is like a bridge. A stepping stone to shifting the attention back in here. And when the attention's anchored here, then there's the knowing that you are that. So this is why meditation is such a powerful tool, because its purpose is to bring the attention back here. And then you realize that you are, in fact, the meditation, and it's not something that you are doing. We might think of a meditation as something that one does, but it actually then becomes what you are. Does this make sense to you? Yeah. It becomes what you are. And this is why it's so powerful. I cannot overstate the power of meditation. And again, it's not about believing me, it's about it becoming your experience, and then there won't be any need for belief. It won't be any need for belief. It's experiential then. Experiential being crucial. Ultimate truth, I like to say, is beyond belief. Or sometimes I like to say it's unbelievable. Obviously that worked for you and you. It's unbelievable. In the sense that it does not require belief. In fact, belief will block it from you. But when you drop the belief, totally, unequivocally, and open totally to the possibility that one actually is this infinite, realized self already made manifest in this form, then that realization will emerge. But you have to drop everything else, all the identity, all the attachment, all of the belief. To mind or ego, which I equate, this is a scary thing, because looking around the room, most of you have probably spent anywhere between 30 and 50, 60 years developing this identity. Certainly I did. And then the invitation from the self is, drop all that. You're not that. You're not that. Drop all that identity, drop all that belief, drop all that attachment, and be who you really are. Mind ego doesn't like this one bit. And it can bring up fear, it can bring up emotion, it can bring up trauma from the past. I need to make this clear to you. But if that stuff does come up, and it can do, this isn't to come up as a challenge to you, to make it harder, to smack you around the head. It's actually an invitation for you to release it. It's actually an invitation for you to release it. Because, and we've all had some pretty tough experiences, I'll put money on it, but they're not who we are. And all of those can be released just by the power of the awareness that you already are. Just by that alone. No effort required. That may seem amazing. No effort required. In striving towards, and this is a, if you like, a pitfall on the path, so to speak. If one strives towards the realization, then you'll push it away. And yet there's this commitment that one makes to meditation practice, say. But that comes with the openness to the possibility that one already is this. It's not, self-realization isn't an achievement. It's not a goal that's, in 5 years' time, I will be self-realized. No. You are that now. You just don't believe you are. You don't think that you are. And you believe that enough, and so it's not your experience. It is this simple. Took me years to realize that. But when the experience emerged, it was like, wow. Here it was all along. Quite funny, really.
Would you say that the majority of people that behave in the way which they consider is correct, and it's only when other people raise an eyebrow or go, or tut, that the alarm is there?
Yeah.
So who's right? And I mean, as a philosopher, would you say that there's no such thing as right or wrong? It's a case of conjecture.
Good question, this. You referred to me as a philosopher. I've never called myself that, and you may think of me of that. I've been called many things, not all of them pleasant. I don't consider myself a philosopher. I don't consider myself a teacher, because self-realization can't be taught. Truth can't be taught. That may seem amazing to you, but it can't. How can you teach that which you already are? The best I can do is offer pointings. But to look at your question, most of us, most of the time, are living in, let's say, what I would call our story. And that's basically a set of beliefs based on a set of experiences that one has had in the life, in this body, up to this point. And that's where we live from.
Yes.
And so we live our life, whether consciously or unconsciously, as you were pointing at, from that belief system. And this is our belief system, this is how things work, this is how things are. And that's okay up to the point where another belief system comes along in another person that may clash with your belief system. And when two belief systems come and people are absolutely, let's say, anchored in their positions, not open to other possibilities, then this conflict arises. because ego likes a good scrap. It likes to be right.
Well, I know you might think that this isn't relevant, but all the talk about Trump,
Yeah,
I mean, he's got the courage of his conviction.
yeah.
But certain people say, well, he's a nutter. But on the other hand, you know, he's got as far as he has. He's been in presidency for a couple of years now, and he hasn't fallen by the wayside. So how do you reason about that?
So, from what I've seen of him, I don't watch a lot of television, I have to say, but I've seen, you can't avoid it, can you? Almost, you know, you're on the internet, Trump has said this or something. You know, what I see is a very strong belief system. Totally and utterly believes in his perception of reality and how things are. And he makes no bones about it. You also said earlier, you know, about things right or wrong. We have this idea of right and wrong. I just want to go to that with the whole thing with Trump as well. From the perspective of the absolute, the infinite, there is no right or wrong. It just is. This may be news to you. It just is. Right or wrong is a human created concept of this is right, this is wrong, I am right, you are wrong. Yeah. This doesn't mean, by the way, that murdering somebody is a good idea. I mean, from the perspective of the absolute, actually, it makes no difference to it. It wouldn't stop a murderer realizing the self. It would still be possible. So there are certain things that we, you know, would say that this, from this perspective, serves the highest truth. And if we come from the place of being open and in service of that, then, and are committed to that, then more likely what we will see and perceive in life is things that what we will call loving relationships, loving connections. But when we go back to the belief systems, and I'm anchored in this belief system and somebody else is anchored into the belief system, and then these come to clash, then this leads ultimately to war. Trump is what he is. You know, some people have said, and I can see why they have said that actually he's showing us to ourselves. He may be, from some people's perspective, an extreme example of that. But actually, if there's something in there that he's standing up and being and representing, it's a if you like, a reflection of the collective, and it's in all of us. All of these facets and experiences are somewhere in all of us, and yet we're still this absolute. And when we remember that and identify with that, then we're in a purer place of the truth of who we really are. And the idea of good and bad then drops, and things just are what they are. And so we're then in place of being in service of, or living from this place of highest truth that's within us all. Does that help?
Well, yes, but would you say that words imply a mentality? Now when you hear people talk about each other, if that person, if you like the person, you may say, oh yes, he's competent. If you don't like them, you call them arrogant. But you have to be competent to be arrogant. The two do go hand in hand.
Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Words, okay, Let me share this with you. It's a quote from a book called The Book of Mere Dad. I highly recommend this book. It's a novel, actually, but it's a spiritual novel written by a chap called Mikhail Naimi. Mikhail Naimi. And it came to me just as you were saying that about words there. And there's a very simple sentence in there that speaks volumes. I'm going to share it with you now. And it goes like this. Words at best are an honest lie. Silence is a naked verity. I'll say that again. Words at best are an honest lie. And I missed a bit from the second part of the sentence. Silence at worst is a naked verity. Verity, if you're not familiar with the word, it's not a common word. Fundamental truth. So,
Verify.
verification, fundamental truth. In this context, it means fundamental truth. So silence is a fundamental truth at worst. So silence, ultimately, infinite silence, ultimate truth. That's who you are. So any words I'm using in this form that you see as Philip, pointing or sharing at that which is in you, that which is in us all, is at best an honest lie. It's coming from within, seeking to offer, pointing and offering from this inner space. One can hear it at this level and go, I don't agree with that. Or one can listen from the space of the heart, and pick up on the vibration, the pointing, the signpost within the offering.
Well, I'm sorry to absorb the conversation,
Yeah.
but they say to rationalise is to make excuses on yourself, to justify. We have to rationalise to stay sane. Now, what do you think of that?
I'm not sure I agree with that, rationalise to stay sane. We do that, and we do that a lot. But to be truly sane, I would point you or offer to you that you need to go beyond the thinking mind into the heart space and simply know what is ultimate truth. So that's a way of saying...
I know, you see, I know a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
And he said that he has to decide whether the person's talking out the back of his head or not.
Yeah.
But we all talk out the back of our heads.
We do. He's going to use a rational approach there, isn't he?
Exactly.
It's almost inevitable by consequence of his profession and training and background and beliefs around the processes and systems that work there. And there isn't anything, let's say, wrong or right about that. It just is what it is. But in the focus of tonight, the realization of who you really are, one must step beyond the rationalized, the thinking mind.
Have you ever thought of doing a presentation of pictures, no talk, but just pictures and symbols?
Interestingly, I've got a program running at Scorton Monastery at the moment, and one of the benefits of, and I actually need it, the questions, to be able to, because often you don't realise what it is that is going to emerge until somebody asks a question. So I've actually used some graphics in that to help articulate or express something that just seems such obvious to you once the realization has emerged. So yeah, I've done this. It didn't occur in the sense of, oh, I'll think this is a good idea. It was, I could see what people might benefit from, and it emerged. Would be a more accurate way of it, if that helps. Yeah. Yeah. So to go back to what you were saying, to realize who you really are, you have to go beyond mind. let me offer something to you. This may be a surprise, it may be news, it may be, oh yeah, I know this. But what if I said to you what you think is mind? My mind, your mind. It's not real. It's not real. Mind, actually, you could look at it simply as just a set of thoughts plus belief in those thoughts that creates the identity from which you then base your experience of life. What if you took away the belief behind the thoughts and then there's just thoughts? Then what are thoughts but just movement of energy in the ether that actually your brain is transmitting into language? What if I said any thought that you've ever had is not yours? That could be a radical one. It's just a vibration, and every thought that's ever been thought in all of eternity, past, present, and what we call future, is already out there in the soup.
Is there an element of what do they call it, dominoes? One setting off is like a conditioned reflex.
Yeah.
That everything that happens is really sparked off by something else. It's a difficult thing to explain.
No, I know where you're pointing, I think. Yeah. So there is some, if I can offer something, then you can correct me if I'm not on the right track with what you're trying to point at. But let's go with a single thought. It's a vibration that's occurred, it's been translated into a thought. What most of us are doing most of the time is catching on to that thought, and then we catch what I call the train of thought. You've heard the term train of thought. The interesting thing, if you observe this in yourself, you will find that the train of thought, once you've caught it, will take you to many stations. One thought leads to another thought leads to another. Perhaps this is the domino, yeah? Perhaps this is the domino. It will take you to many stations, but then I'll add to this, none of them are your truth. None of them are your truth. I'm talking about absolute truth here. I'm not saying I thought that 1 + 1 = 2. No, that's a fact. But in terms of absolute truth, no thought will take you to your truth. My wife had a few insights, if I can recall them here, that are coming to me about this now. So, when meditating upon this, an insight came to her, and it went like this. There's no joy in thinking. There's no joy in thinking. Another one on the same subject, when we were exploring something that she was kind of struggling with, and we went kind of exploring this on Sands End Beach, and we got to the point in the conversation where it was necessary to say, ultimately, you'll realize this for yourself. She'd kind of gone full circle. We were driving home. I'd driven there, so she was driving back. I was zonked out in the passenger seat. And she shared with me afterwards, when we got home, this insight came. And it was about her leaving behind, releasing something from her past. And the insight was this: thought cannot heal your pain. Presence will transform it. Thought cannot heal your pain. Presence will transform it. What is this presence? It is the infinite silence. Just the power of that alone will transform your experience of life. It is so powerful. In fact, it is infinitely powerful. So going back to the domino part, yes, once we catch a particular thought and catch it, and then you will get a domino effect happening. But interestingly, because of this awareness, and we've all experienced this, sometimes we catch ourselves, oh, I've been off on one there. And this is the awareness bringing you back to noticing what's going on within. If you use this as a device, oh, what happened there? I've stopped now. The train of thought has now stopped, and this is an invitation to be back in presence, as presence. There's a little exercise I'll share with you. It's a bit like the Martini advert, anytime, any place, anywhere. It's on the little thing here. I'm just going to find it. Yeah, so on the back, if you're looking from the back, the white side, and opening up from there, this one question, the second one in, it says, for those who haven't got them to hand at the moment, who am I? If you want to understand who you really are, this is the only question ultimately you need to ask consistently and keep on going. Who am I? And then it goes on to say something that may not be clear to you just yet, but I'll expand upon it. The question dissolves the questioner, and the self is realized. What does that mean? The question dissolves the questioner, and the self is realized. What it means is, in the realization of the self, the personal identity is completely dissolved.
As you see yourself, you mean?
Yeah, as you have seen yourself, let's put it that way, that dissolves. And it's all seen as a play, a game, an act that you've been, a role that you've been playing.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
Everybody behaves in the way they consider is
Correct, yeah.
But coming back to what he was saying, a classic example of the domino is driving a car.
Mm-hmm.
We assume we pick up signals from the other drivers.
Yeah.
And there's many a case where low manufacturer lights are giving the person permission to, that there's a confusion of thoughts. And I know the case where we flashed, and the person thought they were saying, look, I'm flashing you to let you know I'm coming through.
Mm.
And a collision's occurred.
Mm.
Now, if everybody's stuck to the rule book of the highway codes, there shouldn't be any accidents.
In theory, yes.
In theory. But we don't.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
If I can just go
Yes.
deeper into this, though. So the dissolution I'm speaking about is of the identity, the ego, in other words. And the self is realized, the non-personal or infinite self. Now, let's say you're walking down the street and you find yourself off on one, or you're having some negative thoughts. Just in the gap that occurs, you can ask this question, who am I? Who are these thoughts being directed at? Ego will go, but me, of course, me, you know, small me.
Or big me.
Or big me, yeah. Ego does both, yeah. Either end, it's still ego. It's still ego, whether it's the kind of, you know, dictator or the shrinking violet, they're still ego. But ask that question, who am I? In the awareness that you are this, that I refer to as, and this is a non-personal I because it chose the words, it wasn't Philip. This infinite silence. And in knowingness that that is the perfectness, the wholeness, the completeness. The form is not that, but the infinite is that, and you are that. What you'll find is it'll stop the train of thought in its process. You may need to do this a few times at first. You know, especially if you're having some negative thoughts, you're on a, you know, kind of self-destruct pattern in these thoughts. Do this exercise, even when you're walking down the street. Who am I? The ego's going, well, it's me. I'm speaking to me. But I am the infinite silence. Trusting that, knowing that, accepting that. If you use this process, it will be very effective in changing your patterns. You don't need to believe me on this, just try it. If you do this consistently, I can guarantee you it will make a big difference. Just this one question, who am I? It wasn't something, again, that this one invented. As the realization emerges, this becomes obvious. Yeah.
So, sorry to keep on, but
That's okay.
It might be relevant, it may not be. Would you say, going on what you were saying, walking down the street saying, who am I, would you say that a depressed person hasn't got a very high opinion of themselves, self-esteem?
Mm-hmm.
Therefore they're saying, look, I don't think much of myself, and that's why you're all adoring me, that's why you don't like me. So this image thing is this relevant to what you're saying?
It is relevant, yes, it is. So maybe a depressed person is like that, low, what we perceive as self-esteem. The dictator, or maybe the Trump, you might argue, has high. He may perceive himself as having high self-esteem. But the self-esteem that we most often talk about is an egoic self-esteem. Egoic self-esteem. The true self-esteem, my offering to you would be, is that you are the infinite one, the infinite silence. In this sense, there is no then need to build what we call self-esteem in the traditional sense of the small s self. If one is the infinite silence, what is there to build upon? Because it is infinite. One is this. So most acts of where we're working from self-esteem, whether we class it as low self-esteem or high self-esteem, are actually coming from the place of ego. But when we accept and embrace that we are the self, the true self, the infinite self, then the idea or concept of self-esteem will dissolve. Because ultimately then it's just a human construct. It's just a construct. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Any other questions? Because there's...
Yeah, well, you obviously had a calling because you gave up your 60-odd hours a week graft to find self-realisation through meditation, and you wanted to bring this to other people. And I'm going to reference popular culture, which I know you're not asked about particularly, but to break free from this matrix of the ego.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the film The Matrix,
Mm-hmm.
the creator, or the architect, as he's known, who created the Matrix,
Yeah.
he's talking to Neo,
Mm-hmm.
and he explained that when they created the first Matrix, they made perfection, but it didn't work because humanity needed the conflict, it needed the diversity, it needed the arguing, it needed the ego, and when you didn't have that, it fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
So the second Matrix he created had all of that,
Mm-hmm.
and even though there's the adversity and the conflict, humanity still at its best thrives and survives. Have you ever sort of considered that what you're doing, I'm only playing devil's advocate,
Yes, okay.
is might be trying to create the first Matrix because you believe that to be the true way that we should be, get rid of the ego and find the self-realisation.
Yeah.
In effect, what will that lead to? Everyone doing what exactly?
Yeah, okay, good question this. So here's what comes. It would be probably more accurate to say that let's say what I've referred to consistently as infinite silence, the absolute, that is, let's say, the perfection or the creator, and that's what we all are collectively. It's not an individual thing. And only that really is the absolute. There's a choice in that. No, go back one step. That being as it is isness. Isness comes before beingness, okay? Isness comes before beingness. It just is. There is no contrast in the absolute. There's no difference between what you might refer to as that point there or that point there. It's all just one. And so it's just simply a knowingness and awareness of itself as itself. That's all. As part of the awareness, there was a detection of the choice, keeping this non-personal deliberately, to experience itself. And to experience, one needs to create time and space. And this, in the same breath, to speak, creates duality. Duality consciousness. Unity consciousness being the realization. Duality being black, white, tall, small, hot, cold. And in this space, ego is formed. And it's through the system, if you like, matrix, that's created. The system is perfect. And it brings itself back to itself. So ego can often get cast as the bad guy. The one that's causing all the problems in the world. And certainly we see and experience, you only have to watch the news to see the effects of that. But interestingly, all of that that's going on, within each act, each experience, is an invitation to come back. Most of us have to go through quite a bit of suffering to get there must be more than this. So there is perfection in the system of the architect, to use the matrix language. I've seen it just the once, so I'm a bit unfamiliar with the detail, but hopefully I've got it correct. There is a perfection in this system that's been created because it creates experiencing, and within that is the invitation to come back home to the self. Go as far to say that it is through that creation of time-space duality that it gets to experience every facet of itself in the domain of physical. And this could also be, you might say, one reason why there's no judgment about good, bad. It just is. It's just a set of experiences. And you might also then go even further to say, through that it comes to know itself more fully, so to speak, than would just the knowingness of the silence. So going on the other part of the question, interestingly, I've tried on quite a number of occasions to stop. World doesn't need this. It's okay, everything's fine. seriously looked at this deeply, why bother? It's all okay. From the perspective of the Absolute, it is. It's all okay, why bother? Why bother? And yet, what I noticed every time this has happened, quite a lot of times I've done this, there's a compelling urge from within to share. And it has a life of its own, so to speak. It's not something from the personal perspective one is trying to control. Like this event tonight, I had no idea yet an invitation emerged would be a good example. Could have said no, of course. But actually, energetically, it felt right to respond to the invitation. And this leads to what I like to speak of as the highest and greatest good. Use this in your life along with this who am I question. What is in my highest and greatest good in relation to anything and everything? And that's the calling of your heart. Get clarity on what your heart's calling you to on anything and everything. And it turns out that what serves the highest and greatest good in the manifestation of you in this form also is in everybody else's highest and greatest good. It may be, though, that others don't see it that way, but you need absolute clarity on this. There's a lightness, there's an invitational aspect to it. There's a kind of compelling energy about it to act. It's an inspiration, an expression of the silence. But I would also go to say, it is true to say, it's all okay. It's all okay. So yeah, I have looked at that quite often actually. And yet, this urge that doesn't come from here, it's just like a, yeah. Quite often I'll be in meditation and some insight comes and there's just this compelling energy to write it down and put it there on the website. Just another simple example. And I would also go as far to say, certainly from what I've witnessed from others sharing, I've heard them say similar. Yeah. But one could sit in a cave in the Himalayas and it would still be okay, because the silence touches everything anyway. And yet for some reason, for reasons perhaps that I can't explain, in this form, in this body, it puts it into certain situations and it seems to want to share. Perhaps, and it's very non-personal. What I have found is if there's something I've tried to do that maybe thought was a good idea, then those things don't happen. But things like this, where it just came out of the blue and it felt energetically good, these do. Does that help answer your question, Alex?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how we're doing for time, by the way.
It's about it.
Is it? Okay. So maybe I wrap up, because it's obviously now about 10 o'clock. Half past, is it? Wow. Okay, well, thank you very much for bearing with this for 2.5 hours. I'm very grateful to Alex and Rob for the invitation, and indeed to all of you who have sat here and opened to this possibility. You know, I said earlier, it is life's greatest and simplest gift. It's up to you what you take from that. But I trust it has served you in some way. Thank you for your time. If anybody is interested in exploring this further, I do run 1-day, 2-day events I do have a YouTube channel. Otherwise, keep a lookout on my website. My contact details are here. Other than that, thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you.
Namaste. Okay, so just put that down there and try not and hit the mic again. And just get yourself, as they say on Jackanory, are we all sitting comfortably? Yeah. It's a good idea to close your eyes and maybe have your feet planted on the floor, just so you're a bit grounded. So just closing your eyes now. And just firstly, bring your attention just to your body. Just simply noticing the body. And as your attention rests more fully upon this body that you have, just be open from your heart now to the experience of what I referred to as spheres of light, the pure I am of the universal sense. It's just a beingness, an aliveness. Just allowing your attention to notice that state that is I am. I am. Resting all of your attention on this I amness, this universal and non-personal presence, beingness. Just watching this, just noticing this. This sense, I am. And as your attention rests on this, know that it does so and can do so. Because as subtle as it may be, there is this higher presence, this higher awareness that is watching or seeing or witnessing this I amness. And that is infinite. silence. Simply allow your attention now to dissolve into and as this silence. Just simply allowing, no effort, just allow. Just noticing, drifting deeper and deeper, and dissolving into and as this silence. This infinite silence. Knowing that all is well in and as this silence, and that you are that. All of it here, now. Letting everything go now. Everything is simply watched from this silent essence. Nothing else matters. Deeper. Everything dissolving into and as this silence. All is well here. this unchanging, unmoving, formless, timeless space. That is a silent witness to all else. So in a moment, I will tap this singing bowl. It'll make a ringing sound. Just stay in the silence. I will do this 3 times. And just gently now, whilst keeping your attention in the center of the silence, just bringing yourself to noticing your body, the chair you're sat on, and when it feels right for you, just gently open your eyes. Good.